This beggar girl protects a millionaire who dared to challenge Hell's Angels members, and something terrible happened minutes later. Please rate my story from 0 to 10 in the comments. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The sound of motorcycles sliced through the morning air of the small town of Harmony Creek, like a collective roar of defiance. Jason Sterling, 30, watched from the window of his modern mansion as about 100 bikers positioned themselves in front of the electronic gate, their faces hidden by dark helmets that reflected the golden light of dawn. The entrepreneur ran a hand through his dark hair, still disheveled from sleep, trying to process the surreal scene unfolding before his eyes. The previous night, at the local dive bar, his words had been laced with arrogance and disdain. "I'm not afraid of anyone, especially not these weekend warriors," he had declared loudly enough for everyone to hear, the glass of imported scotch trembling slightly in his hand as he watched the group of bikers gathered at the corner table. His tech company had thrived over the past 5 years, turning him into one of the wealthiest men in the region, with investments ranging from stock market shares to Bitcoin holdings, building a fortune that seemed to grow exponentially every quarter. Now, facing the consequences of his reckless provocation, Jason felt the weight of reality pressing against the bulletproof glass of his window. His financial assets, his properties, all the capital accumulated through years of hard work, seemed insignificant in the face of the palpable tension emanating from the purring engines outside. The wrought iron gate, which had always represented security and status, now seemed like a fragile barrier against the crowd, awaiting a response to his insults from the night before. The phone rang incessantly on the mahogany desk, but Jason ignored the calls, knowing they would be from Brenda, his older sister, 35, probably furious to have found out about the incident through social media. The psychologist never missed an opportunity to criticize his impulsive behavior, and this time he knew she would be right. His fortune in dollars, carefully diversified in international funds and high-yield investments, could not protect him from the situation he had created. It was then that a small figure emerged from among the parked motorcycles, walking with hesitant steps towards the gate. Jason frowned, adjusting his focus to get a better look. It was a girl, apparently only 2 years old, wearing dirty and torn clothes that looked like they had seen better days. Her brown hair was tangled, and her small face carried an expression of determination that contrasted dramatically with her apparent fragility. Lily, although 4 years old, looked much younger due to the severe malnutrition that had shaped her development. Her large, expressive eyes shone with surprising intelligence as she approached the bikers, who stopped their conversations to observe the unexpected child. Some removed their helmets, revealing faces marked by life but softened by the presence of the girl. "You can't hurt the handsome man," Lily declared in her fragile voice, but loaded with a conviction that silenced even the noise of the engines. She pointed in the direction of the mansion, her thin arms trembling slightly with the effort. "He gave me food yesterday. He's good." Jason felt a pang in his chest as he heard the child's words. Fragmented memories from the previous afternoon began to form in his mind. The quick stop at the traffic light, the little girl extending her dirty hand towards the window of his imported car. The inexplicable impulse that had led him to hand over the sandwich he had bought for lunch, a gesture that had been so automatic, so unconscious, that he barely remembered doing it. The bikers exchanged glances, clearly disarmed by the unexpected intervention. What should have been a direct confrontation over honor and respect had turned into something completely different with the presence of the little defender. The leader of the group, a bearded man in his 50s, leaned down to speak to Lily, his gentle voice contrasting with the intimidation he had exuded minutes before. Jason watched the scene unfold with a mixture of relief and confusion. His wealth, his material possessions, All the net worth he had accumulated through calculated business and strategic investments had no influence whatsoever on that moment. It was the word of a hungry child, a girl who had been living on the streets for 2 years, that was changing the course of a situation that could have ended very badly for him. When the bikers finally drove away, their machines roaring into the distance until the morning silence returned, Jason remained at the window, watching Lily, who had sat down on the sidewalk in front of the gate. The girl was playing with a piece of cardboard, folding it into different shapes, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just saved a multi-millionaire from a potentially dangerous situation. At that moment, something changed deeply within Jason Sterling. For the first time in years, his attention was completely focused on something that had no market price, generated no dividends, nor increased his cash flow. It was just a child, vulnerable and alone, whose unexpected loyalty had just changed the course of his morning, and without him knowing it yet, of his entire life. 3 weeks had passed since the incident with the bikers, and Jason found himself looking for Lily on the streets of the city with a frequency that surprised him. His investments in cryptocurrencies continued to generate substantial profits, but for the first time in years, he couldn't fully focus on the financial reports that piled up on his desk. The image of the girl sitting on the sidewalk, defending him with a courage that he himself did not possess, had become a constant presence in his thoughts. It was during one of his walks through the central square that he found her again. Lily was crouched near the fountain, trying to reach some coins that tourists had thrown into the water. Her clothes were the same as the previous week, only dirtier, and her bare feet showed small but visible cuts. Jason watched for a few minutes, noticing how she moved with calculated care, as if each gesture was a survival strategy learned through necessity. "Hey, kiddo," he said, approaching slowly so as not to scare her. Lily looked up, and a genuine smile lit up her face when she recognized him. "Handsome man," she exclaimed, running towards him with a joy that made Jason's heart clench. "You came to see me?" Over the next 2 hours, Jason discovered fragments of Lily's story. Her mother, Clara, 28, worked as a cleaning lady in various establishments in the city, but disappeared for weeks at a time, leaving her daughter completely alone. The girl had learned to fend for herself, sleeping in the awnings of closed stores, scavenging food in restaurant dumpsters, and depending on the occasional kindness of strangers to survive. "Mommy said she'll be back soon," Lily explained with the naturalness of someone who had normalized abandonment. "She always comes back, but sometimes it takes a long time." Jason felt a growing fury towards a woman he didn't even know. All his wealth, built through years of smart financial decisions and high-yield investments, seemed insignificant in the face of the neglect that allowed a 4-year-old child to live on the streets. He bought food for Lily that afternoon, and then the next, establishing a pattern that would soon become part of his daily routine. The trouble started when the photos appeared on social media. Someone had captured images of Jason and Lily together in the square, sharing a snack on one of the benches near the main church. The post quickly spread through local Facebook groups, accompanied by speculative comments about the rich businessman's intentions towards the street girl. Deborah Forster, 26, saw the photos while reviewing contracts in her law office. His ex-fiancée had broken off the relationship 3 months earlier, tired of Jason's self-centered behavior and his inability to see beyond his own interests. The ambitious lawyer had built her career defending social causes, and the sight of Jason apparently using a vulnerable child to improve his public image infuriated her. The next morning, Deborah appeared unannounced at Jason's office, her heels echoing across the imported marble floor as she marched towards the main room. Her blonde hair was tied in a severe bun, and her blue eyes sparkled with the determination that Jason knew very well. "I need to talk to you," she declared, ignoring the secretary who tried to stop her, "about your new philanthropic activities." Jason looked up from the profitability charts he was studying, feeling a familiar weight settle in his stomach. Deborah, if you came here to question your motives regarding that girl? Yes, that's exactly why I came. She stood in front of the desk, her hands resting on the polished surface. Jason, do you really think no one will notice what you're doing? I'm not doing anything other than helping a child in need, he replied, but his voice sounded defensive even to his own ears. Deborah laughed bitterly. Helping, or trying to repair your reputation after that ridiculous scene at the bar? Because, to be honest, the first option would be a big surprise considering you've never shown a genuine interest in anything that didn't increase your dividends. Deborah's words echoed in Jason's mind for the rest of the day. When he met Lily the following afternoon, the girl seemed different, more reserved. Her big eyes watched him with an awareness that seemed impossible for someone her age. People are talking bad about you because of me, she said suddenly, while playing with a piece of string she had found. I heard some ladies at the bakery saying you're only being nice to me so people will like you again. Jason felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Lily, that's not true. I care about you because what? The girl's question was simple, but loaded with a wisdom that disconcerted him. You have a big house, a nice car, expensive clothes. Why do you care about me? For the first time in his adult life, Jason found himself without a ready answer. His fortune, his possessions, all the financial security he had built through investments in gold and international holdings offered no compelling justification for a 4-year-old's question. That night, alone in his mansion, Jason received a call from Brenda. His sister wasted no time with courtesies. We need to talk about this situation with the girl, she said bluntly. People are talking, Jason, and not in a positive way. Since when do you care about other people's opinions? He retorted, but he knew his sister had reason to worry. Since my brother started acting suspiciously. Jason, do you understand the implications of what you're doing? A single rich man getting close to a vulnerable child. That can be interpreted in very dangerous ways. After hanging up the phone, Jason stood on the balcony of his house, watching the lights of the small town that spread like golden dots in the darkness. All his wealth, all the capital he had accumulated through smart business and high-return investments, seemed irrelevant in the face of the complexity of the situation he found himself in. The next day, when he arrived at the square to meet Lily, she wasn't there. Neither was she the day after. A whole week passed without him seeing her, and with each afternoon that passed in vain searching for the girl, Jason felt an emptiness grow in his chest that no financial achievement had managed to fill before. Winter came early that year, bringing with it icy nights that cut the skin like sharp blades. Jason had spent 2 weeks looking for Lily on every corner of the city, questioning shopkeepers, watching every awning where she might be sheltering. His business began to suffer from his constant absence from the office, and the financial reports piled up unanalyzed, something unthinkable just a few months ago. It was on a particularly cold morning that he finally found her. Lily was huddled behind a dumpster in the back of the municipal market, trembling violently under a piece of wet cardboard. Her lips were blue with cold, and she was coughing worryingly. When their eyes met, she didn't show her usual joy, just a wary look that broke Jason's heart. "Lily, for God's sake, you're going to get sick!" he exclaimed, immediately taking off his coat and wrapping the girl in it. "Why didn't you look for me? I told you I'd always be in the square." "I don't want people to talk bad about you," she murmured against his chest, her voice muffled by the fabric. "I heard some women saying you're just pretending to like me to become famous. I don't want you to have problems." At that moment, Jason understood the extent of the child's emotional intelligence. Even at just 4 years old and living in subhuman conditions, Lily had grasped the political nuances of their situation and chosen to sacrifice herself to protect him. The realization left him simultaneously proud and devastated. As he took Lily to a nearby coffee shop, ignoring the curious looks of the other customers, Jason didn't realize he was being watched. Clara Santos had returned to the city the night before, after 2 months disappeared in a downward spiral of addictions that had taken her to neighboring cities in search of cheaper drugs and jobs she could do in her deteriorated state. The 28-year-old woman looked like she had aged a decade during her absence. Her brown hair was dull and unkempt, her pale skin showed obvious signs of malnutrition, and her clothes looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. But her eyes, although bloodshot and tired, gleamed with a desperate cunning as she watched her daughter being cared for by an obviously wealthy man. Clara had heard the rumors. In a small town, news about a multi-millionaire businessman interested in a street girl spread quickly, each version of the story becoming more exaggerated than the last. To a mind warped by addiction and the desperate need for money, the situation represented a golden opportunity. That afternoon, when Jason said goodbye to Lily in the square, promising to return the next day, Clara emerged from the shadows like a ghost from the past. The girl froze at the sight of her mother, her eyes filling with tears of a complex mixture of relief and fear. "Mommy!" Lily cried, running into the arms of the woman who had abandoned her so many times. Despite everything, a child's unconditional love for her mother remained unwavering. Clara hugged her daughter, but her eyes remained fixed on the figure of Jason, who watched the reunion from a distance. "So you're the rich man who's been hanging around my daughter," she said, her raspy voice carrying a subtle threat. "I'm Jason Sterling. I've been helping Lily because—" he began, but Clara interrupted him with a bitter laugh. "Because you have a good heart, right? A millionaire who suddenly cares about a poor girl." She squeezed Lily against herself possessively. "Or do you have other motives?" Jason felt a chill down his spine as he realized the implication behind Clara's words. "Ma'am, I know exactly what you just," she hissed, "and I know how much this is worth to you. Your reputation, your company, your position in society. I imagine you'd pay well to keep certain interpretations from reaching the wrong ears." The blackmail was crystal clear. Clara wasn't interested in Lily's well-being. She had seen an opportunity to exploit the situation for her own gain. Jason watched in horror as the woman dragged Lily away, the girl looking back with tears in her eyes, but without the courage to resist her mother. 2 days later, Clara showed up at Jason's office. She had made an effort to get dressed up, but the marks of addiction were impossible to hide completely. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat in the leather chair in front of the executive desk. $500,000, she said without preamble. "It's the price for you never seeing my daughter again." Jason almost choked on his coffee. "Excuse me? You heard me. $500,000 for me to take Lily far away from here and never come back. Or I can stay in town and spread my version of the story about a rich man's interest in a vulnerable child." Clara leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with malice. "I imagine how your investors would react to that kind of scandal, how it would affect your business, your entire fortune built so carefully." The proposal made Jason nauseous. His fortune in stocks, his diversified investments in international funds, all the wealth he had accumulated through years of hard work was being used against him by a woman who saw her own daughter as merchandise. Worse, he realized that Clara was right about the destructive power of rumors in a small community. "And if I don't pay?" he asked, although he already knew the answer. "Then Lily stays with me, but here in town. And I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are." Clara smiled cruelly. A worried mother protecting her daughter from a rich predator has a very compelling story, don't you think? That night, Jason walked through the empty streets of the city, his mind turbulent with the impossibility of his situation. All his wealth, his material possessions, his financial success not only failed to protect him, but were being used as weapons against him. For the first time in his adult life, He faced a problem that money couldn't solve cleanly. When he passed the square where he used to meet Lily, he saw a small figure sitting alone on the bench near the fountain. His heart leapt at recognizing her, but as he approached, he realized that she was crying silently, her small shoulders shaking with each sob. "Lily, what are you doing here? Your mother." "She went to the bar," the girl said without looking up. "She said she was going to solve some problems and that I had to wait here, but it's very cold and I'm scared." Jason sat down next to her, every fiber of his being screaming to wrap her in his arms, but aware that at any moment someone could see them and misinterpret the situation. "Lily, I need to tell you something important. Maybe I can't anymore." "I know," she interrupted him, finally looking at him with those big, wise eyes. "Mommy said you're going to give her money to take me away. She said you don't want me around anymore." Jason's heart broke with the devastating simplicity of that statement. A 4-year-old child had been manipulated into believing that she was a burden, that her only value was in the money that her presence could generate. And he, with all his fortune and resources, was completely powerless to change that reality. 3 months had passed since Clara took Lily away with the blackmail money, and Jason's life crumbled in ways he had never imagined possible. His tech company faced the worst crisis in its history after he neglected important contracts during his weeks, obsessed with Lily's situation. Clients cancelled projects, investors withdrew capital, and the fortune that had taken years to build evaporated every day. Sitting in his now much smaller office in a modest commercial building in the city center, Jason reviewed the latest financial reports. His investments in Bitcoin had plummeted along with the market. His stock market shares were sold to cover emergency debts, and what remained of his fortune could barely maintain the basic operations of his reduced company. The man who once possessed a multi-million-dollar fortune now struggled to pay the rent for a 2-room office. But the financial loss paled compared to the emotional emptiness that consumed him. Every night he walked the streets of the city, secretly hoping to spot Lily, only to remember that Clara had fulfilled her part of the agreement and disappeared with the girl. Her absence was like a black hole in his chest, sucking away any spark of motivation he still possessed. It was on one of these melancholic walks that he overheard a conversation that would change everything. 2 of the bikers who had positioned themselves in front of his old mansion months ago were talking outside a mechanic's shop. "I still think it was unfair to the guy," said one of them, adjusting the chain on his motorcycle. "He was just drunk and talking nonsense. We just wanted an apology, nothing more." "Yeah, but the kid spoke so nicely about him that it was kind of embarrassing to continue," replied the other, laughing. "When she said he had given her food, it kind of changed everything, right? Shows that the guy isn't that bad." Jason stopped abruptly, his heart pounding. For all these months he had carried the guilt of having created a dangerous situation with his arrogance, when in fact the bikers never had violent intentions. A simple conversation, an honest apology, would have solved everything from the beginning. His pride had transformed a misunderstanding into a crisis that had cost him his reputation, his company, and indirectly had taken Lily away from him. The revelation hit him like a lightning bolt. If it weren't for his own arrogance and fear of losing prestige, he would never have created the drama that allowed Clara to exploit the situation. Lily was suffering somewhere unknown because of his inability to simply admit he was wrong. That night, Jason called Brenda for the first time in months. His sister answered with obvious surprise in her voice. "Jason, where have you been? I've tried to call you dozens of times." "Brenda, I messed everything up," he said, his voice breaking for the first time since adolescence. "The girl, Lily, she's God knows where because of me, and I don't know how to find her." There was a long silence on the other end of the line before Brenda replied with unprecedented gentleness. "Tell me everything from the beginning. Everything." For 2 hours, Jason recounted the entire story to his sister. The incident with the bikers, his encounters with Lily, Clara's blackmail, his obsession with helping the girl, and how it had destroyed his business. Brenda listened to everything without interruptions, and when he finished, her response surprised him. "Jason, for the first time in your life, you acted with your heart instead of your head. It was clumsy and naive, but it was human. The person telling me this story is very different from the self-centered brother I knew." 3 days later, Brenda appeared at his office, accompanied by a woman Jason recognized immediately, Deborah. His ex-fiancée looked different, less hostile, her eyes carrying something he interpreted as cautious understanding. "Brenda told me the whole story," said Deborah, sitting in the simple chair in front of the makeshift desk. "And I owe you an apology. I assumed the worst about your motivations without trying to understand what was really going on." "You had reason to distrust," admitted Jason. "I have a terrible track record of only caring about myself." "Had, maybe. But people can change." Deborah opened her briefcase and pulled out some documents. "Brenda asked me to investigate the whereabouts of Clara and Lily. As a lawyer, I have access to resources that you don't." Jason's heart skipped a beat. "Did you find them?" "Clara was admitted to a rehabilitation clinic in Rochester 6 weeks ago. Overdose. She was alone." Deborah paused, watching the expression of horror grow on Jason's face. "Lily was temporarily placed in a municipal shelter there." "Temporarily?" asked Brenda. "The authorities are looking for close relatives or investigating the possibility of adoption." "But—" Deborah hesitated. "Jason, you need to understand that your current financial situation makes any formal adoption process almost impossible." "I don't care about money," he said immediately. "If she is okay, if she is safe, that's what matters." Deborah and Brenda exchanged a meaningful look. "That's exactly what we expected you to say," murmured Brenda. A week later, Jason was driving his used car towards Rochester, his hands trembling on the steering wheel as he approached the municipal shelter. Deborah had managed to schedule a visit, explaining to the authorities that he was a person close to the family who would like to show interest in helping with the child's well-being. When Lily appeared in the visiting room, Jason almost didn't recognize her. She had grown visibly, her hair was clean and properly cut, and she wore appropriate clothes that made her look like a normal child for the first time since he had met her. But her eyes, those big, expressive eyes, seemed to have lost some of the sparkle he remembered. "Handsome man," she whispered, hesitant, as if she didn't believe what she saw. "Hey, kiddo," he said, crouching down to her level. "I missed you." To his surprise, Lily didn't run into his arms as she used to do. Instead, she remained where she was, studying his face with a seriousness that seemed impossible for a 4-year-old. "You don't have the nice clothes anymore," she observed. "And your car is different. It's true, a lot has changed. The lady at the shelter said that you don't have much money anymore," said Lily, her small voice loaded with a painful wisdom. "She said, that's why you can't adopt me." Jason felt tears prick his eyes. "Lily, I need to tell you something very important. Good people don't need to be rich to be important. They just need to be true." The girl tilted her head, considering his words. "Are you true now?" "I'm trying to be," he admitted. "Every day." It was then that Lily finally smiled, and in that smile, Jason saw all the hope he had lost in recent months. She walked slowly to him, and for the first time in months, hugged him with the surprising strength of a child who had found something she thought she had lost forever. 6 months later, Jason worked as an employee at a small accounting firm, earning enough to rent a simple 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of town. Deborah had managed to get him temporary custody of Lily through an honest legal process, with Brenda serving as psychological reference and emotional support. On the morning he received the call confirming that the adoption had been officially approved, Jason was helping Lily get dressed for school. A public school where she had quickly excelled due to the exceptional intelligence she had always possessed. "Heart Dad," she said suddenly, using the term for the first time. "Are you happy?" Jason stopped tying her shoes, his eyes filling with tears that he had learned not to hide. Happier than I ever imagined possible. As they walked hand in hand through the same street where Lily had once begged, now as a real family built not by blood but by unconditional love, Jason understood that he had lost a fortune in money but gained a wealth in happiness that no financial investment could ever provide. Sometimes the greatest transformations in life cost everything we thought we valued, only to teach us what really matters. If you like this wonderful story, please comment giving it a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.